acquitted Judith Ward, jailed for life for the murder of 12 people in 1974. For the first time, the court indulged in heavy criticism of the forensic scientists involved, accusing them of bias against the defendant. Well, joining us now is scientist and author Brian Ford, who's an expert on forensic science. Brian, the Guardian this morning says Judith Ward was ambushed. Forensic scientists took the law into their own hands. What went wrong?
It's quite terrifying, isn't it? It's the first time that in all of these cases that the courts have actually come out quite so strongly, and they have said that these forensic scientists were lying, that they actually said things that they knew to be untrue. What really went wrong, I think, at two levels there were serious mistakes. The first level is that the science is not really understood by the public, it's not understood by barristers, it's not understood by the way that the law works. For example, in science, if you carry out a test and you have a positive result, you never accept that on its face value. There has to be a control experiment. You have to do another test with a parallel sample from somewhere near but not the same, and then say the control was negative but the sample was positive. But nobody in any of these forensic cases has ever said what were the results of the controlled experiments. Because these kits that they use, you see there's a solvent that removes a little bit of the material from the skin, and then you separate out the chemicals, do a test and say, now that could be an explosive. But those tests often give faint positive results when there is no explosive, and the right questioning would have brought that out. But the second thing that's gone wrong is that instead of the forensic scientists using the principles of science, which to me means trying to discover the absolute rational truth of a situation, they use it almost like a weapon to prove that they, or the client, which in this case would be the police, the state, that they are right and the others are wrong. And if they know something which might interfere with their point of view being accepted, then they simply keep quiet about it. In science, you should be much more objective and open and honest than that.
You're aware of many cases, many traditional cases of where forensic evidence has gone drastically wrong, one particularly relating to glass, wasn't there?
Oh yes, well I do remember, I did a case some years ago for a lawyer, and the case devolved on somebody being accused of breaking into a shop, and they found in the plimsolls little fragments of glass. And the forensic evidence stood up and he said to the jury, he said, the fragments of glass had the same refractive index as the fragments of glass from the window. And he sat down and the jury all nodded at each other. But when I was called, I pointed out that all window glass in Britain these days has the same refractive index because it all comes from the same factory up in Cheshire. Now, that point, of course, opened the jury's eyes. But that chap should have said, mind you, all glass these days has the same refractive index. What he was doing was trying to prove that the man was guilty. What I was determined to do was to open the issue so that people actually understood. You see, if you went into court and somebody started quizzing you about something you'd seen, they would be saying to you, but how could you be sure? But are you sure it was the person? But how are you qualified to know? But if you're an expert witness, you can stand up there in the witness box and your opinion is valued as highly as the currency of truth.
Are scientists under great pressure from the courts and from the police even to provide the sort of evidence to support a prosecution?
Yes, they are. They are under pressure because of the fact that we live in a post-Thatcherite era where everything that seems to matter is cost effectiveness, and you are unlikely to pay people who don't turn in the results that you want. So there is a great pressure all the time to prove that you're right and not to try and get at the truth.
So the future for this kind of evidence?
The future for this kind of evidence is dubious. I personally believe, and this is one of the reasons why although I'm happy to be a university fellow, I've always worked independently. I don't believe, between you and me, Michael, that much of what passes for science nowadays is science anymore. We're moving towards a technocracy. We're trying to prove a polarized viewpoint seems to matter. And when that happens in the courts, so that a girl like Judith Ward comes out, offered £200,000, £10,000 a year, she's being given her back pay, or half her back pay, and that's all she's coming out with.
Brian, well, thanks very much for your insights. That's very helpful. Thank you very much.